23 people online now. I feel like we should have this in Tidmarsh Common or something. I welcome you all. Don and Angela, did I hear you're calling in from South Africa? Is that correct?
Yes.
No. Okay, somebody is in South Africa, did I hear?
Yes, Muriel and I are in South Africa.
That's the Grosses, not Don and Angela. Don and Angela are in Michigan.
I'm not hearing the sound from them.
Oh, hold on, let me come help you.
No, this device here.
Oh, is this really being recorded? And sound here. Okay. Good afternoon again.
Did I turn it down too much?
Yeah, we can't hear it all.
Well, that was that too. Oh.
What did?
You said you're in South
Is
Africa.
that right? It was low
Yes.
before. Okay.
You can hear that, right?
Okay.
Could someone unmute and speak up for a minute to make sure we got the sound right?
What do you need to hear?
Okay, thank you very much. We're good. Okay.
Dick Crouch, Steve. Steve,
Thank you, Dick.
it's Dick Crouch. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I might turn it up just a hair more. I think I can do that here. Okay. Does everybody see the master plan screen on your computer?
Yes.
No.
Yes,
No, mine just says
Yes.
discussion with neighbors.
Yeah,
we're just seeing the
That's what it
title.
is.
title page. Thank you much. Okay, if everybody will mute, please do so. This is going to be an open discussion. Anytime you want to ask a question, unmute yourself, interrupt me. If I'm going to cover it later, I'll kind of put you off a little bit, but please, let's keep it interactive. I'm not sure why we haven't had more folks show up in the conference room here, but please do so. Please feel free to interact. I think, okay, there are a bunch of eye charts here. Some of them you'll have to study, maybe zoom your screen a little bit to full screen in order to see the numbers, but I'll help walk you through it if, as need be. What I'm going to do as an agenda is to talk about a little bit about the history and background since takeover and turnover and what our results have been to date. Some of the principles that I believe are the foundation of our club finance, some of the fees that members pay and what we're doing with residents versus non-resident members, and how UPCC compares to comparable clubs. In the master plan part of the discussion, I'm going to focus primarily on our space needs. And because I think we all recognize there are infrastructure needs for golf course irrigation, for lake banks and bridges, and for expansion of our kitchen in order to serve our growing membership. I'll talk about who should contribute and what the overall plan is. I'll touch a little bit about why we think a bond is the appropriate way to go. And then I'll specifically drill down to Warwick and compare, look at the average home in Warwick and the impact. And I'll also look at, I picked my home in comparison to Lakewood Ranch and see where we actually are in comparison to other communities.
Hi, Marcus.
Who would you like? Will everyone please mute, please? Thank you. When we went forward, the planning group made the representation that the club would generate an operating surplus annually. The operating results have proven that to be the case. In each year since formation, including the time of COVID, we've shown an operating surplus in club operations. We also said there would be no additional assessments for 3 to 5 years. It's been 3 years since 2019, and the first payment that we're asking under this bond would not occur until November of 2023. And as we think about going forward, the demand for outside dining has increased. You may remember that pre-COVID, we didn't serve any evening meals in the cafe. Now the cafe is full. We have what's lovingly called Tent City for additional outdoor dining in season. And our capacity, our membership has grown to 2,200 people, and there are much greater demands on the facilities. The demand for golf has been good. We've been very aggressive with our pricing, and demand for outside golf and for new full memberships continues. Home values are up, turnover is low. There are new buyers and new members looking for a variety of lifestyle opportunities. Let me talk about, and this was one of the questions that came to me from Lou, I believe. The bond proceeds in 2019 were about $4 million. We've had club surpluses, we added to that total, and non-operating income to give us about $5.7 million in available capital funds that we've deployed or committed to 2019. That includes about 2.5, I think it'll be a little higher than that, 2.7 or so for dining renovation, pickleball and croquet changes. We're resurfacing the parking lot this summer. We've had to put some equipment in the kitchen. We've invested in tee boxes, green bunkers, and cart paths on all 27 holes of the golf course. We've had additional equipment, air conditioning, roof replacements, prepared to a maintenance building, et cetera, and designated certain reserve funds. Basically, we've used the $5.7 million to address what we consider our phase 1 priority needs. Let's look at club finance for a minute. And from a board perspective, the most strategic issue we face is where are our clubs, new and future members coming from? Where are university parks, new and future homeowners coming from? And what are they seeking? We need to provide that in order to assure member value and to assure homeowner value. Our goal is to properly fund the footprint with modern, up-to-date facilities that are needed. And our governance is oriented toward educating our members and residents to fund the footprint. Member dues, unlike a corporate environment where you have a number of product line units and you're dealing with a lot of profit centers, in a club, member dues subsidize all activities. Every activity is participation is only a fraction of members. But it's the social interaction between people with different lifestyles and different activities that make a club successful. I look at the income statement for the club as the engine to drive programming. I want John and his team to have a modest surplus every year, which is only prudent. But I really want to return every dollar of member dues back to members in value. I want to bring a band in for an event, or a harp in for a Friday night dinner, or other, we want to provide that value back to our members in equipment, facilities, and services. Our strategic focus is forward-looking on the capital needs and resources. And that drives our growth over time and provides for a healthy club. From club benchmarking, a company that looks at 1,800 clubs around the country, but specifically focuses for us on residential clubs in the southeastern part of the United States. And what they say is the club isn't being run efficiently. There are concerns about efficiency. Yes, the job of club management is to be efficient, but it affects there's a very little flexibility in spending. If you want to be open so many nights a week for dinner, you have a certain parameter, and if you want to be open 7 nights a week for dinner, you're going to lose more money in food and beverage. That's a fact. Clubs actually choosing to try to break even or make a little profit for food and beverage are the weakest financially. Clubs subsidizing food and beverage with member dues are the healthiest financially. It's a simple reason. If you may have heard it previously, we don't operate like a restaurant. We only have 1 to 1.2 turns a night. Everybody wants to eat between 5:45 and 7. We sit down at the table, you have that table essentially for the evening. There may be opportunities to fill in occasionally, but essentially that's your table. You have a staff, front of the house, who knows whether you're gluten-free or diabetic, who knows what drink you want at the bar, who will stock a bottle of special scotch just for one single member. So service is high. There's also a theory that low initiation fees and lower dues attract more members. Well, look what they're struggling with over at the Meadows. They lowered their dues and they're not getting more members because they have aged facilities. They've borrowed some money to address that. I won't go into that detail. But clubs with the higher initiation fees and higher dues have the waiting lists and more members. We're also speaking that golf-centric clubs generally are weaker than clubs that provide a broad array of services and amenities. They're the healthiest. That means not only racket sports, but fitness, wellness, activities, function areas. And finally, restricting capital investment keeps our club affordable, some people say. Actually, it doesn't. Kicking the can down the road and waiting to invest until facilities lose their operating value leads to inevitable failure. In looking at where we stand And this data is from 21 clubs in the southeast area of the US, with a large percentage in Florida, with 27 holes of golf. And this is what full family membership would be. And you can see we're pretty much at the lower end of the range, because we can do so because we're subsidized by outside golf. If you look at our revenue, including the outside golf, we're a little bit over $9 million. And we're kind of in the median range. But if you look at the orange line, our capital income only comes, and this was for 21, only comes from initiation fees. We had no capital dues, no source of reserves. So part of the plan that's been put forth is to generate capital dues from each member, higher capital dues from non-resident members, and to raise non-resident initiation fees higher than resident initiation fees, and to, if you will, sequester 10% of outside golf revenue for capital purposes. I'll talk a little more about that later. In club benchmarking looks at three kinds of clubs: a green, a yellow, and a red. The green clubs, the ones that are most successful with the highest return on their invested capital, are ones that do have increased capital investment to provide broader amenities and services, which gives you increased member satisfaction, more interest in joining, basically higher initiation fees from more members, which allows you to increase capital spending, which allows you to support your overall infrastructure. On the other hand, on the red side, if you restrict capital investment, you have to have narrow amenities and deteriorating, or you will have over time, deteriorating facilities. You won't have the member satisfaction. You'll get lower demand from new members. And in order to accommodate that, clubs often lower initiation fees in order to attract members or offer discounts or promotions. In turn, they get more members, but the engine doesn't provide the capital income that's needed. And there's a lower return on invested capital, and overall, a weaker club that is in trouble. Now let's take that overview that I use and look at what we have here. And here come the eye charts. I apologize for it, but I think you'll get the impression. We have currently 2,200 people who are members of the club in about 1,230 membership units. Of these, 23% of residents are full members. About 11% are active in rackets. 54% are social members, and 17% are non-members who have been grandfathered. Our increase in membership of 400 people over the last couple of years has strained our capacity, particularly in dining and kitchen. And that's one of the reasons kitchen is high on our priority list for expansion. I think you've seen the dues projection for fiscal '23. This was reported at our meeting in May and will be officially voted on in August. Full memberships or all membership levels will go up 2.5%, and we'll have a substantial rate increase in summer memberships next year. We've also introduced ways to achieve financial reserves over the long term through increased initiation fees with higher fees for non-residents than for residents, an allocation of outside golf, capital dues for members at 5% of whatever your dues level is, and for non-resident members at 10% of dues. Once again, to get a capital contribution from non-residents. And we're doing this in a way that capital dues and initiation fees remain competitive. When you say how we compare to comparable clubs, we put this compilation together. I recognize it's very fine print, and I ask you to look at it afterwards on your screen at home, where you can probably see the numbers a little more clearly. The point I would make is that we are competitive with other clubs in the area. Some would argue, well, this club is private and we're not, and others would say, well, Rosedale is semi-private, but we can't compare to Rosedale, we're much better than them. So here you can pick the clubs you feel you want to compare us to with the pluses and minuses. And I think you'll see that our rates and offerings are very comparable and fair, and actually below what you might expect to pay for the quality you receive at University Park. I'm going to talk now about the master plan, but focus primarily on 3 areas of what I call our space needs. And the first one, which is probably, I'll dive in to the most contentious and say, today, with the age group that's moving into University Park, 55 to 62 or thereabouts, they have had a life focused on wellness and fitness. That trend is national, albeit international, and it's something that's highly desired. We currently have about 1,200, 1,300 square feet of weight and cardio area. We don't have any stretch area at all. There is no place for a trainer to work with a client in the weight cardio area. And the class studio is 375 square feet that can barely hold 6 people and an instructor. So it doesn't serve the needs for what we have today, which is about 250 active users with 20, and we're looking at one where we'd have 20 in a class, and what kind of class studios we might need. Arguably, this projection has 3 studios. Arguably, we could have 2. That will all be decided. We've scaled this fitness wellness down from about 11,000 square feet to today about 6,500, eliminating sauna, steam rooms, locker rooms, lap pool, and some other facilities. We're looking at a need to grow from where we are to about 6,000 square feet. We need staff offices. For those of you who've been upstairs at the varsity club, you'll recognize that the steps are steep. There are trip hazards in the facility. It's not up to code. There are no windows. There is no running water upstairs. There are no restrooms. There's no conference room. There's no break room. It is a place where staff turnover has increased, or our lack of ability to acquire quality staff offices have been a hurdle. There are no restrooms on that floor either. So what do we need? We have currently about 20, I don't have the number in front of me, but my recollection is about 2,300 square feet. We need about 3,500 square feet of offices. These aren't palaces. We're talking 120 square foot office, maybe a little larger one for John so he can have a meeting table. But this is a minimal offering to get quality staff and retain them for a 20-year career. The third area of space needs is in meeting space. You know, when I talked to Laurie early on, she has said one of the things that the club really needed was additional meeting space. All we had was the card room and the varsity club bar area when it wasn't used for bar purposes. We had no other meeting space in the club. What we're suggesting is that 3 combinable rooms, basically a 50% increase over what we have now, that would seat 250 people, would be appropriate to have 3 activity spaces. You could open them up into a larger space and perhaps have entertainment for 250 people in an evening. Looking at auditorium spacing for 250 people, we need about 3,000 to 4,000 square feet, about 50% larger than the lakeside room. Once again, divided into 3. We can't use the lakeside room, which is a dining area, for meeting space. Retrofitting that, moving tables, limited times, especially if we want to try to open more evenings for dining, is not an alternative. You know, depending on whether we put these facilities in one building with 2 stories, might be the lowest cost approach. The varsity club, the renovation, and then another facility for fitness wellness will probably work, but it's probably the most expensive option to retrofit the varsity club as it is today, to build up the 2nd floor, enclose the area that's now the cart barn on the rear of it, and make that into office and meeting space, and relocate a cart barn out by the putting green is an expensive option. The building is old, has mitigation, undoubtedly has mitigation and ADA issues, and everything would have to come up to compliance. So that's an option. A 2-story facility is an option, and 2 one-story facilities are an option. In any event, we're talking about needing 14 to 15,000 square feet. And at today's price, which is higher than historic, we're about $400 per square foot based on the estimates we're getting from architects and builders. This is a list of the projects we feel are essential in moving forward, and other projects that can be funded through the capital dues while also establishing reserves. Basically, we're talking the kitchen, we're talking the golf course irrigation, we're talking about lake banks and the bridges. We're talking about a permanent fix to the parking lot. We'll have a beautiful parking lot, by the way, come Labor Day when it's refinished and striped and we're resurfacing it and it will be safe and lighted and good, but the trees are still there and the roots will reemerge. So we need to address that larger issue at some point. The three space needs I talked about are $6.5 million. And to move the pro shop to the varsity club space and upgrade the pro shop with a deck and expanded use for an all-day light snack opportunity is another $600,000. We're talking about $15 million, $15.5 million of projects going forward. The question always comes as to who should pay. Should both homeowners and members contribute to the annual capital requirements of the club? This is the brake fix, this is the air conditioner, this is the mixer in the kitchen that doesn't work, or the salamander that burns out, the ice machine that goes bad. This doesn't provide new capability, but replaces existing investments, assets that have reached their end of life. And we believe that annual operating capital should come from members. When we look at the infrastructure and the master plan, the new facilities, the new capabilities in our club and community, should both homeowners and members contribute to these capital needs? And the answer we say is for infrastructure and for master plan, new investment, long-term investment should come from both members and homeowners. At some level, I look at what we're trying to do in University Park back in my town in Moorestown, New Jersey, when we had an increase in builders and neighborhood in the community, and the high school needed more space, and the sports fields were overcrowded. And we built an L on the building to have more class space, just as we might have meeting or activity space here. And we built a new sports field so the junior varsity had a place to practice that wasn't on the same spot as the senior varsity. We put out a bond for that for the school district, and that's really enhanced our homeowner value. And that enhancement is what we're seeking to do with our club. Once again, any questions at this point? Let me just since I haven't heard from any of you, I can't be hitting every answer out there. But if you have any questions, take a moment and unmute and feel free to ask.
Steve, it's Dick Crouch.
Yes,
Back on your slide about the dues increase, did those numbers include the capital dues also?
where you're talking here.
Yes.
This dues increase is the operating dues, and the capital dues would be 5% on that. So for the
That's not
five,
mine.
okay, so for a full member, $9,500 for 23, for calendar 23, would have an additional $475 of capital dues, 5% of that total. Does that answer
And a
your question?
non-resident member would have a 10% of that total?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Steve, it's Greg Spanis.
Yes, great.
Simple question, I think. What is the denominator that you would be using in, and again, hypothetically, the denominator you would be using in a bonding situation? Is it like the 1,200 homeowners, or is it the larger 2,000 number, or is it something other than? What I'm trying to drive towards is the increment. What is the increment? So if it's a $4 million bond and there's 2,000, interested parties, that's $2,000 a head. If it's a smaller number, 1,200, it would be a larger, number per head. I guess that's what I'm driving at.
I can, when we did the original bond to purchase the club, we spent a lot of time looking at that situation. And, there were views that the expense should be shared equally by all 1,202 homes. Mm-hmm. And there were other views that the bond should be shared totally based on assessed value in an ad valorem fashion. Mm-hmm. After a lot of discussion, we basically came up with a plan that 50% is shared equally among everyone, and 50% is allocated based on the value of your home. Mm-hmm. And that's the formula, the algorithm we're planning to use for this bond. It's not been approved yet. That's still an issue before the board to be decided on with resident input. But in my personal view, that's the most equitable and probably the only view I can defend. And
I think it's perfect. That's perfectly reasonable. The logic there is perfectly reasonable, and that's. But what the number you're using is about the 1,200 homes. So this is a bond that is an obligation of the homeowners association.
That's correct.
Okay, got it. So one concept to perhaps consider. My club up north did this, and it was pretty well received conceptually and in fact. They offered some of the homeowners the opportunity to simply prepay the amount. If your share of the $4 million is $3,000, you could pay your $3,000 up front and take some discount to it, which was fair because it wouldn't be financed. It would be cash on hand versus cash, that.
Let me address that. On the original bond or on this bond, any homeowner can pay it off at any time. We have to go with an overall assessment on the bond in order to have the investment banker quote on a fixed number. So that once the bond issues, if an individual homeowner, there is a prepayment provision, and any individual homeowner, if they so choose, can pay off their allocation. Mm-hmm. Very personally, I look at a bond, if I'm building a wellness fitness center or a meeting center that's going to have a 30-year life, I'm not sure I, as a current homeowner, want to pay for that whole thing for the guy who buys my house after, I'm no longer here, let's say. So I don't see the logic for it, but if anybody wants to do it, that potential is available.
Well, our club up north probably has a lower average age census to it, but I'm point taken. Again, I think it's a good explanation and candidly a very good presentation. I'm going to mute again and just continue to listen. But thank you guys really for all your hard work.
Thank you. So the components of what for capital funding are the tax-free bond, and an $18 million bond at 5.5%. Currently, rates are about 4.6%. This is based on something in the fourth quarter, and our financial advisors are telling us 5.5% is their best estimate. Every 0.5% would be about $600,000 or $700,000 on money available for projects.
Steve,
Yes.
just a question in regards to the real estate transfer fee. I see you have it down as $300,000 annually, which seems a little aggressive. What is that based on? How did you come up with that figure? I see you do percent fixed fee. Is this going to be a buyer will pay in for the transfer fee? Is this the seller that's going to pay for it? How has that been figured?
Okay, that hasn't yet been decided. The issue, we're looking at the reserve study that's currently underway, where we've taken every asset in the club at worth $2,500 or more and put them into a table on their useful life and projected what we need for capital reserves over the long term. This is as you can see, a very complex exercise. We hired an outside firm to do it. I've seen a first draft, but we haven't gotten to the point of understanding exactly what we'll need yet in capital reserves.
I have one other question also is everything else that I see where the RD has the legal authority to do that. I find it interesting that a real estate transfer fee, was that specifically addressed in the charter? How is that legally allowed to happen from the RD onto me as a property owner?
Okay. Our council tells us that we have the authority to impose that fee. I don't want to get into a detailed discussion right now. I don't know if we don't need it, we're not going to use it. But if it's needed in order to establish reserves for the community, then we're going to put it in place, and we'll have to make some decisions as to whether it's a percent or a fixed fee, buyer and seller, and all the other aspects are not decided right now. Okay, but what the point of this chart is that we need capital reserves. The HOA has capital reserves that avoid surprise assessments. We have none. We need to establish them over time, and that's what we're doing with this process. Let me go back to a question I may have heard from Greg earlier and talk about what this bond impact would be on a Warwick Gardens home. There's a formula that basically says, half of it is fixed and half of it is based on the market value as perceived by the property appraiser. This isn't what you'll sell your house for. This is what the property appraiser has as your house, the market value on your trim notice. The average Warwick Gardens home in the property appraiser's inventory has a value of $650,000. such that the average Warwick home would have an annual tax of $1,290. And that would be a fixed annual obligation starting in 2023. When you look at other neighborhoods, you can see what their average price is and what their obligations are. Using the 50-50 scenario, a lower priced community, a lower home value community like Virginia Waters or Whitebridge would be less than half of what Albemarle would be. Some folks have asked for a strict ad valorem assessment, 100% based on home value. If we were to go that way, which I don't recommend, it would be about a 4 times difference between the lower value homes and the higher value homes. But I believe a 2 times ratio is more suitable. I'd be pleased to discuss it with anyone who would like to outside of this meeting. What are the alternatives? You know, one of the advantages, the recreation district has a lot of disadvantages. We have municipal rules. We have sunshine laws where I can't talk to my fellow board members except at a meeting. We have a lot of problems. The one big advantage we have is we can issue municipal bonds, which are the lowest cost financing that's available to anyone. It's lower cost than a bank loan. It can be collected through our tax collector in Manatee County. And it can be spread over 30 years. It moves with the home. It's not a lien on your home that has to be paid off at when you sell it. It's a tax that moves with the property. A bank loan isn't an alternative. We really don't have security available to a bank that they could liquidate if the loan was unpaid, and it'd be a higher cost. UPCAI reserves are needed for their purposes, and legally it would be very problematic. An annual assessment. We could assess $5,000 a year for 3 years. Other than the fact that I'd probably get shot in the dining room, that doesn't match the investment with the long-term life of the facility. We put in the building or totally renovate the varsity club or do something else that has a life of 20 to 30 years. The people over here shouldn't pay it over 3 years. It should move with the property. And finally, we can't do it from our capital reserves. It would take too long and we'd never achieve our goal. And the club would move into a degraded category. Let me just take another look, and I use my home here as an example that compares my home in Warwick to the Lakewood Ranch home. That home was more expensive. It was $766,000 assessment. Mine is $539,000. But when you look and you add the fire district, their CDD, they have 2 of them. One is an operating CDD that basically covers the roads and lights that we have in our HOA. And the other is the original CDD for the community. and you add their HOA fees, which don't have, and they don't have a maintenance-free home, you get to about $19,000. If you look at my home with the taxes, with the fire district, with the 2019 bond, with our HOA in Warwick Gardens, and with the potential new bond price that what it would cost me in my home, you get to $17,000. They have a higher value home than ours, so the difference in ad valorem is $3,000. So arguably, their tax or their total cost of ownership is $16,704 versus mine, $17,374. However, we get premium cable for worth $1,400. Based on Warwick Gardens, the cost of our maintenance-free neighborhood is $3,400 a year. So basically, they're paying 21,000 and change versus our 17,000 and change. I don't want to get specifics on any number here, but in every community I've looked at, except so far for one, which I haven't yet fully curated, even after the new bond, our total cost of ownership is very competitive with, for example, homes in Lakewood Ranch. I think this is important. We're not getting out of line. We're being very reasonable and giving homeowners the opportunity to enjoy the benefits of a club with outstanding exemplary facilities, amenities, and services, which is part of our mission as well as the mission of UPCAI. Okay. Some other questions I've gotten. One question was basically in view of the current and projected economic climate with inflation, supply chain issues, skyrocketing costs, possible recession, is it timely to consider implementation of a master plan to put in an investment? You know, it's not a perfect time. I wish I had done this 2 years ago because interest rates would have been lower, and we would have had lower cost for the investment. But I don't believe we can kick the can down the road. I believe we have to take the opportunity when it presents itself. I think it would be doing a disservice to our homeowners not to invest in the infrastructure and improvements we need in order to maintain our home values over the long term.
Dave Joe Hulowitz, Matt.
Excuse me?
This is Joe Hulowitz, Matt. But since I asked the question.
Oh, please do.
Yeah, Steve, there's a difference between kicking the can down the road and rolling the dice. And with all the uncertainty with the economy right now, I really think we're rolling the dice in terms of what we've been paying for these capital projects. We don't have a clue unless you've done an economic impact study.
Well,
and what factors have you used? What equations have you used, to determine what it's going to cost a year, 2 years for the cost of labor, materials, the cost of inflation in general?
I think there are projections, and we could each probably find a pundit on television or in the newspapers that would project whether inflation is going to continue or whether it's going to attenuate. I think there are people who talked about stock market Armageddon for years, and there are people who are out there. I think we have to have a cushion. Maybe we need more of a contingency. Maybe it should be a $20 million bond instead of an 18.
Or maybe it should be cut in half until we determine what the climate's going to be.
Well,
I mean, take a closer look at pickleball and tennis courts and some of the nice to do's versus needs to do. And that's my other question. I don't think enough attention has been given to delineating what comes first, where are our priorities, what should we do, which projects should we do before any other, or are we just going to do the whole thing at one time?
Okay, I think there has been recommendations, and I think Jim Case, before he resigned, made the point that perhaps we should just deal with the kitchen, the golf course irrigation, the other golf course needs, and not do anything else at this point in time. That might be an $8 or $10 million bond, probably closer to 9 or 10. And what would it do? You wouldn't see anything improvement. Don't forget, we have 69% of our homeowners are either social members or non-members. Do we really want to present something that doesn't give them any real benefit with all the funding going to the golf? I think that that's an issue that we weigh, and we believe that if we live up to our mission, both the UPCAI approved, board approved mission and the board approved mission of the district, we provide outstanding facilities for a variety of lifestyles.
Well, not to belabor the issue, but we built a Gucci dining room so they would come. And because of the lack of labor, you can't fill that dining room half up. You can go up there and try to do a walk-in reservation. Half the tables are empty and they can't seat you. And that gets right into the issue I'm talking about down the road. If we're still having labor issues, what happens? No matter what you do to the kitchen. Okay, I've said enough. My point was, I think that there really needs to be a much closer look at the economic climate and not move ahead as though we're operating in a perfect economic world. We're not. And there are projections of a recession. Then what?
I understand.
Thank you.
Steve, this is Jim Westby. I'm new to University Park, moved in February, live on Chatsworth Court.
Thank you, Jim.
I want to thank you for this presentation, because it's very helpful for me. Now, some of the other people maybe not so much, but for me, it's very helpful. And I want to give you a couple comments. First of all, an $18 million bond sounds like a lot when you bought the whole club for $18 million 3 years ago, based on what I understand. I'm still learning here, okay? So don't. And then there was an extra $5 million of money that went in the pocket, so you had money to operate. Secondly, Joe is right on target on the inflation issue. I mean, I'm hearing people costs going up 20%, et cetera, with wages, materials, et cetera, and I can see another increase coming that wasn't in your charts. And so I think that needs to be addressed. And third, and most important to me, that's not in there, is some mitigation for these poles that Florida Power and Light just put up that, in my mind, made a major impact on this facility. And if those poles were up, I would not have bought my house. And so we need to do something about that. And I don't know what that is. I know what I'd like to do. I'd like to put them underground and get rid of them. But that's something that's got to be worked through. And I wouldn't spend one nickel on any of this stuff until that is worked out. That's how strongly I feel about that issue. I don't know how it happened, but I got one right behind my house, and I look at it every time I drive in my driveway. I look at it every time we come into Warwick Gardens along the golf course and say, oh, wow, we've turned this place into an industrial park. And we as a group got to stand, and there's 4 people up in Notting Hill. I mean, they are really taking a bath, and we got to stand up and do something about this. And until we figure that out, we shouldn't spend any of this money. Now, that's my take.
Okay, regarding the polls, I certainly appreciate the terrible, if you will, or unfortunate, I'm not sure what word I want to use, visual impact that they've created. I know the homeowners association is working diligently with FPL to see how we can mitigate things. We've, as a club, which is not, as a club, we are committed to assist in any way we can. But it is truly, I'm not passing the buck here, but we're all in this together. It's the same people who are members of the club and members of the community. And we want to mitigate that issue, but it's not an issue that's on top of our agenda. It's on top of their agenda, and we're helping.
Well, I appreciate that. And I know there's people working on it. Bill and Curtis and some other people. But what I'm proposing to you, and that's great, but what I'm proposing, until we find out what the plan is and what we can do about it, we should hold this money. We shouldn't be spending all this money, because we may need some more, and that's not going to go down very good.
I thank you. Thank you. I appreciate your
Thanks for your presentation. I appreciate it very much.
Steve, this is Toy Estes. I have a question in regards to the irrigation on the for the golf course. Has there been any analysis done? Because what my understanding was that the to spend the money was to be able to reduce expenses, to better manage our water. Do we have any in-depth analysis that can give us back information as to why we would spend the $4.3 million and what we're going to get back in terms of, like I said, reduced water expenses, our ponds, less maintenance? So do we have anything on that?
What I do know is that the current irrigation system is 30 years old. It's impossible to get repair parts from any vendor out there. The manufacturer doesn't make them anymore. Curtis has scavenged parts from other clubs or where they've retrofitted their irrigation system, and he's keeping it together with Band-Aids successfully, can potentially keep it together for a while longer, but it has to be replaced. It's not a return on investment issue. It's an issue that if we want to maintain the golf course, its playability and the number of rounds we have a year, it's a must going forward.
I wasn't disagreeing particularly in that. I'm just curious as to whether or not, making that new investment to upgrade, which may, as you said, be necessary, but will we get some kind of good return for it, and what might that be? And you don't have to answer that question. I just think it's something to lay out as far as moving forward financially. What benefits will that be for our operating expenses? Thanks.
Yeah, there may be some potential reduction in power usage, and there may be some potential benefit in having more water available for the overall community. But those aren't the justifications on which we need to do this. We need to do this in order to maintain the golf course.
Steve, I've got a question or a comment, I guess. And it's done with profound appreciation for the time you put into this and your view on it. You obviously are in favor of the bond. And that kind of raises concern about some of the representations that are made because they're biased. I guess when we go back to the turnover, it was stated that, this bond will be it. And we did have, as you said, I think 5.7 million.
We had 4 million, but yes, go ahead.
So, what do we do with it? Well, as Joe Helowitz said, we built a pretty fancy restaurant with a lousy support system for it because the kitchen wasn't there. And we knew the kitchen needed work, but we did the restaurant first. We did the restaurant before a crisis in irrigation for the golf course. It's like putting the fancy stuff ahead of the fundamental infrastructure needs that we have. And, I'm involved in the HOA, and this has got nothing to do with the HOA, but the HOA did lift stations and said, we got to do lift stations first.
Well,
And
members,
all this, wait, let me finish. All this makes me concerned because I don't want to owe anybody any more money. It's like a mortgage on my house, and I understand there's a potential for return on it. I got that. But I'm worried the next shoe's going to fall. I don't know what is wrong with the infrastructure, but I was told at the turnover, no more bonds. Now we're saying, well, we knew all this stuff and we knew there was more bonds coming. And I'm saying, okay, what's the one after this one? And Steve, you show these numbers, I can't even read them. They're so tiny. If you could send this, an income statement, a cash flow, and a balance sheet to me in an Excel format, I'd like to look at it. You said things like only 7% of the expenses are efficiency related. We can only improve 7% of the expenses. I don't buy that for 1 second, not 1 second. So those are my comments as an individual Warwick resident to you.
okay.
I would think everybody in Warwick
Hey, Bill.
would enjoy seeing the same things, that we could then spend some time looking through them as opposed to just seeing them at the Zoom meeting.
Well, one other comment, and Steve, if it's just council, I would never show that 9,500 number for full members and then say, oh yeah, there's 5% on top of that. Show them the $10,000 number, whatever it is. It raises my suspicions, I think, and it worries me.
Steve.
Yeah, Steve, this is Lou Jensen.
Well, I think in the presentation before the board in the May meeting, that detail was shown, Bill. It wasn't copied here. Let me just leave it at that. But I understand we're talking about a 7.5% increase from last year. In today's environment, that's not a huge increase, and I think it speaks to the fact that the club has been managed very efficiently going forward. Another question?
Yes. Steve, this is Lou Jensen.
Hi, Lou. How are you doing?
I'm fine. First of all, I'd like to echo what others have said. Thank you. Thank you for the work you and others have done on this. I understand it's, very complex set of issues. But I'm with Bill Lockbourne on some of the points, on all the points that he made. And I would like to, first of all, stuff is so detailed that I really would like to see the charts so that I can, assimilate what you've said better than I've been able to. And maybe more importantly, is the plan to have whatever proposals the board comes up with, the RD board comes up with, will that proposal, both in terms of the projects and the cost, be submitted to the homeowners for either approving or disapproving what the board puts in front of us? I think that's very important. And I don't know, I'm really, I'm troubled by some of it.
The bond needs the approval of homeowners. So we won't be going forward without a vote of homeowners in support of the initiative.
Okay, good.
Input on each project is solicited, has been solicited, and will be continued to be worked with as these plans come into fruition, as we get to renditions, as we get to drawings, as we finalize them. Members and residents will all have input.
Okay, I apologize, I don't understand that. Is that to say that each major project will be subject to the vote of homeowners, or did I misunderstand that?
They will have input to each project.
Okay, well, that's a little bit different.
Yes, it is. Okay.
In any event, thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, hey guys, you all know me. I'm doing my best here to share with you what I think makes sense for the future of our club and for our community, and to keep it healthy and vibrant. Yeah, there are things that we could explore in more depth, and believe me, we are actively doing that every day.
Steve.
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 Some question, yeah, one, who's next?
Candace, I think.
Candace?
Oh, Steve, hi. Could you explain to the people in Warwick the time restrictions on being able to float another bond? Because I think that has an effect on things like the irrigation system, which we basically won't have because the life of the irrigation system will not meet the time restrictions to float another bond, and we can't do this piecemeal.
Well, I don't think we can do it piecemeal. If we go with a bond, the monies would be available in fourth quarter of this year, first quarter of next year. If we went with an assessment that would cover just the irrigation system or some other necessities, that money wouldn't be available until January of 2024. The way the financing and assessment process works for a municipality like ours.
No, what I'm talking about is that there's a certain period of time before you can ask for another bond, something like 3 years. Am I right about that?
Could you repeat the question, please?
There's a time restriction before you're able to float another bond. So if this bond doesn't pass, there's a time limit, like 3 years, I think, before you can ask for more money again. And I am not familiar with that statute. I have heard reference to it. And that may in fact be true. I don't know. I can get back to you with an answer.
But I think she's saying that.
No, she's saying that if we have a bond referendum and the referendum fails,
Right.
how long is it before we can put another bond referendum to homeowners?
Right.
And I don't know the answer. I'll get the answer and get it back to you.
Yeah, I think it was addressed at the last meeting. That's where I'm getting it from. I'm not making it up. Or
And we stated at the last meeting, but I haven't gotten that opinion from our council, and I want to ask the question formally.
Okay.
Other questions? How about, or open comments? I mean, I've heard comments from some of you,
Mr. Ludmerer, Mr. Surgeon has his hand raised.
oh, please.
Hey,
Go ahead.
Steve, I'm looking at the total picture for how much people will increase their expenditures through this and the HOA. And I know there's one board and another board, but as Jim pointed out, there is a major pole issue going here that has degraded the values of our community. And no matter what, we're going to have to do, if nothing else, camouflage that. And although we say that's HOA, the truth of the matter is that the easement is in the recreational district. Therefore, I think it's only fair to tell the homeowner that here is your increase with this 40RD and all, and I think you've done a fantastic job. I would like to see the next portion of it that says, HOA, here's what your increase may be. Here's what the increase may be for camouflaging, and here's your total cost. I think our homeowners need to know that as they move forward. You can't take these things individually. This poll issue is beyond all of us, but I think the RD board, the HOA board needs to get together and say, dear homeowner, in 2023, here's what you can anticipate for your total increase. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I think that's an issue. I will just remind you that when we do the comparison, and we did it with Lakewood Ranch, I did it with pick my home, but pick others. In Warwick Gardens, we are run efficiently. We've had a wonderful neighborhood committee, and as a result, we are actually, we are very competitive with other communities. We have a problem with the polls, no doubt about it, and it needs to be addressed, and the expense will be there. But even with that expense, I expect we're going to be very competitive with other communities.
Steve, I'd like to make a comment. It's Dale Otterman.
Yes, Dale, please.
I think piggybacking on what Steve Surgeon said, we do have two entities that are charging us money, but we only have one pocket individually that our money is coming out of. And your comparison to tell me it's competitive doesn't change my financial situation. So I think we need to be careful how we spend all this money. And we all need more details before we'll feel good about voting for this bond issue.
What details would you like specifically, Dale?
Well, some other points were brought up where, you're talking about $18 million. And I hear in general what you think you're planning on spending it on, but I don't see all the specifics and know how it's all going to work out. Bill Lockhorn brought up thoughts about money that the club could potentially save money and maybe spend money in other ways. I think all those details that have been brought forward, we all need to see that before we know how we feel about this.
Thank you.
Steve,
Thank you.
Joe Halowitz, may I piggyback on that?
Excuse me?
Steve, it's Joe Halowitz. Matt, piggyback on what was just said.
Sure.
Yeah, I think there ought to be a plan B. I think that to come to the homeowners and say, this is it, take it or leave it, it's not going to sit well. And from what I've heard in terms of input this evening, it doesn't seem to. And I really think there ought to be a backstop plan so that we're not saying, oh, gee, okay, it's all or nothing. That there's a plan B that we could fall back on so that the most essential and really the most essential programs can be addressed.
Okay.
Mr. Ludmerer, Mrs. Sheets has her hand raised.
Angela, please.
Hi, this is Don. I raised the hand. So I just want to, as new residents, just first of all, thank you, Steve, for you and the others' work on this. We want to echo that. This presentation is enlightening and there's a lot of change management and it looks like assumptions that sort of have to change. As I understand the operating model of the club, there's going to be a bond sometime in the future. It's the only viable financing tool that we have in order to finance capital improvements. Strategic improvements might have been your words. If we don't do a bond, and as Bill says, if we don't take on that obligation, there isn't money to do anything. And then, as you said, so I think this is helpful. I think all the questions that have been asked are really good questions. There's more diligence to do here, but I also think I think everybody needs to understand that there is never going to be a time in the future when there isn't going to be a bond. And the question is this the time? Or as Joe has counseled us, is some other future time going to be better or might it be worse? But it's a race to respond to these deteriorating facilities and infrastructure and try to time the market and find the best possible time to do it. And, usually when these kinds of decisions are in front of you, you end up making the worst decision. You can't make a good decision. They're all bad. They're all not good options, but there are worse options and there are worse places to be than where we are now. But I think people need to realize that for this club to have the kind of, to be where everybody wants it to be, there's going to be bonds in our future. I don't see any other way to do it. But thank you for your work, and the comments have been most enlightening, and I'm sorry we don't see those polls. I'm just shocked and saddened that to hear what that sounds like. So we're going to come back from Michigan with a lot of vinegar in our spirit about that, and hopefully we'll get that remediated, but that's terrible to hear that. So thank you all.
Who else has a comment?
I think I might add just to the last comment about, there is going to be a bond because again, there isn't money to do otherwise. I think you got to look at the markets as they are now. And if you're looking at interest rates and directionality of interest rates, it's hard to believe that they're going down. Conceptually, they're probably going up. So as a resident, I'm probably more in favor of locking in some funding today at current rates than trying to game what it might be, 6 months, a year from now. Just again, macroeconomically, I could go into a very long a dissertation on the fixed income markets, but they're a mess. And again, kind of it would have been great to have locked in financing at 4 something, but I don't think locking in financing at 5 something is a bad idea. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, Steve, may I make another comment, please?
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, I really relate to the comments that Mr. Sheets made. But some of us have a history in this place of 20 plus years. And I'm relative to the last gentleman that spoke, I'm also an economist with multiple degrees. And I'm not sure that the folks that make decisions about the financials of this lovely community really understand that placing millions of dollars into the club and its infrastructure are necessarily and certainly going to increase the value of our homes into the future. Nobody can tell me that that's certain, particularly in an environment where our taxes are going up. My taxes went up 20 to 25% with the last bond payment that I have to make with my taxes. Our maintenance costs are going up. Many of these homes have roofs that need to be replaced. All kinds of costs are going up. And, you know, I frankly don't need an extra cost to, when I get to the point where I want to sell my home, I don't need to have an extra cost, including interest rates and mortgages, burden my ability to sell this home at a good price. And nobody can tell, and I think some of you have referred to this, nobody can tell what the market for homes or anything else is going to go to in the future. So I think we need to be very risk averse and conservative in terms of what cost burdens we place on our homes. And again, I've been here a long time, and I've paid a lot into this place to make it as lovely as, you know, others of you know, my neighbors want it to be. But, you know, I'm a little bit tired of this idea that we want to do all of these things, you know, more office space, more gym space, more croquet courts, you know, items in the kitchen, et cetera, you know, enough. Because if we go on a spending spree with another bond burden, well, I don't know how much longer I'm going to live, but I think the future is not going to be so wonderful. And I am not convinced that all of these surveys of other clubs have anything to do or little to do with the way that we run our operation. And frankly, I went through, unlike some of you, with the original process of transferring the responsibility of this club from Neil to us. And that was a fiasco, in my opinion. I could be wrong. Whether the ultimate decision was right or wrong, I don't know. I voted for it. But I'm not pleased with the lack of transparency. And this is an exception. And I admit this is an exception and a wonderful exception. But at least from my experience with the original transfer of the club from Neil to us, I am not, despite all of the data that we've seen this afternoon, I am not comfortable. And I only hope that residents in Community Park, and it's not 20, whatever the number was, 2,100, it's a lot smaller than that, understand what additional burden they're taking on. And I frankly, for one, don't intend to take on that additional burden.
Thank you, Lou.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay.
I don't see any other hands raised, Mr. Ludmerer.
Okay, thank you. It's cocktail time, guys. Have a good evening. Thank you all. Please feel free to shoot me an email afterwards if you have further questions or comments. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Steve. Great job.
Thanks, Dave. Bye.